Good morning. I'm State Senator Joel Anderson, the Vice Chair of Public Safety, and with me today is Senator Jim Nielsen. I'm honored to be joined today by three California's top law enforcement leaders. Kern County Sheriff Donnie Youngblood, who is the current board president of the California State Sheriff's Association, Kings County Sheriff Dave Robinson, who is the current board treasurer of the Sheriff's Association, and Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones, the immediate past president of the California Peace Officers Association. We have joined together today to discuss the threat that SB 54 poses to public safety for all Californians. With that, I'd like to start with Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones.
Thank you. Good morning. As introduced, I'm Sacramento County Sheriff Scott Jones, and I stand here in the absolute strongest opposition to SB 54. There are two distinct populations of undocumented immigrants in California. There are hardworking men and women, children and families that want nothing more than to have access to the opportunities that we all take for granted. I and the rest of California, and in fact law enforcement, has a tremendous amount of empathy for these folks. More poignant than that, in my role as a law enforcement executive, my main concern is public safety of everyone in my community, regardless of their immigration status. We, and I think I speak for all sheriffs and chiefs of police, we never ask someone's immigration status when they call us for help. We do not participate in ICE sweeps or immigration checkpoints. Our primary and sole concern is to ensure that all members of our community, regardless of their status, have the comfort and confidence to call us if they need help. This is the population that advocates and proponents of this bill would have you believe that everyone in the undocumented population belongs to. But that simply isn't true. There is another population of undocumented folks. Like any population, there are a certain percentage that choose crime as a way of life. Their vocation is victimizing others, and they commit as heinous and as violent of crimes as their American counterparts. For this population, we need to protect the rest of the community, including the undocumented part of the community, from these folks. SB 54, if passed, will impair our ability to do that, and it will cause violent and career offenders to slip through the cracks and be released back into our communities. Let me say that again. If SB 54 passes, it will allow dangerous, violent career criminals to slip through the cracks and be released back into our communities. There will be more Kate Steinleys. There will be more Jamil Shaws. There will be more Danny Oliver and Mike Davises, along with the countless other victims that have fallen at the hands of undocumented persons in our state that choose crime as a way of life. The way we do this is we participate in our jails with ICE. We allow them to come into our facilities and carry out their mission. If SB 54 passes, we will not be able to do that. We won't be able to answer their calls, answer their questions, allow them access to our database, and there will be violent career offenders that slip through the cracks and get released back into our community. And a little bit about the finances, the potential loss of revenue stream for California law enforcement. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that fiscal impact should never be a driving force, the sole driving force for legislation as important as this, but it can't be ignored. Although many politicians believe it does, this money doesn't exist in a vacuum. For the loss of every $10 million to California law enforcement, for example, you will lose upwards of 100 officers from the streets. So not only will you be allowing dangerous career felons to be released back onto the streets, but you'll have far fewer officers in the state of California to be able to protect people. We need to find a way to balance the safety and security of our undocumented populations in our communities with the safety and security of our community at large. To do so will require both courage and honesty, but unfortunately, SB 54 offers neither one. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, and at this time, I would like to introduce Sheriff David Robinson.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, Sheriff Dave Robinson, Kings County, which is in Central Valley, California. One of the impacts that I wanted to talk about with SB 54, if it were to pass and be signed by the governor, is the drug issue that we have in California and nationwide. You know, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, it's run rampant once again in our state. And part of that obviously can be attributed to some changes in laws that has occurred. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop enforcing those laws and doing everything we can to keep these criminals off our streets. Randall Allison was an arrestee here in Kings County, or in Kings County where I'm from. He was transporting more than 200 pounds of cocaine on Interstate 5 through our state, and he was arrested. Under SB 54, I, as the county sheriff, would not have been able to tell Immigration and Customs Enforcement that he was in our custody. He was an illegal Canadian immigrant. That's what this will do. Under SB 54, it's going to protect those drug cartels that we're trying to keep out of our communities and that have major impacts on the lives of our families and our children's and our schools. The opioid epidemic is wild in California right now, as it is elsewhere in the country, and we have to be able to do something about it. And one of those tools is being able to work with our federal partners to make sure that we deal with those criminals that are coming into our country, and we have to get them out. And one way that we do that is by working with ICE once they come into our custody, and we need to be able to maintain that relationship. And so, you know, in conclusion, SB 54 is just it's a horrible bill, you know, and we really need the public to be aware of the impacts that it will have in your own communities where you live and where you're trying to raise your children. And we need everybody to come out and let Senator De Leon know that this is not good for California and not good for our communities. I'd like to turn it over to Sheriff Donnie Youngblood, Kern County.
Thank you, Dave. One thing that I would like for the people to ask themselves, if this bill passes, if Senate Bill 54 passes, what is going to happen with ICE? And it's really this simple. They will no longer, we have them embedded in our jail where they do all their own work and deport who they think needs to be deported. If they're not able to come into the jail and have access to the data, they will then go into my community where 40% of my people from my county are in the country, probably undocumented. If they go into those communities looking for these criminals, they're going to sweep people that are hardworking farm laborers, hardworking bus drivers, whatever they're doing. So there's going to be collateral damage to the very people that Senate Bill 54 proposes to help. If the state of California is labeled a sanctuary state, and Kern County happens to be labeled a sanctuary county, I get about $5 million from the federal government with beds where I house for U.S. Marshals. I get another $500,000 from SCAP, which is the alien fund for housing these some of these people. If you take away that, that's about 45 deputy sheriff positions. Kern County right now is suffering from the downturn in oil prices. I have currently 116 vacant deputy sheriff positions. You add 45 to that, we won't even have 24-hour coverage in our outlying areas. So this is a very devastating bill, and don't lose sight of the fact of who the victims are with these criminals that are in this country illegally committing crimes. It's the other people who are in this country undocumented. That's who they're victimizing. And the undocumented community is not afraid to call sheriffs or to call law enforcement, because we have not been in the immigration business in my career of 40 years. We don't deport people. We don't go out on sweeps. They're not afraid to call us, so that's not a good argument. So this bill is going to do the opposite of what the author believes it's going to do, which is to protect those people. That's what we do. We don't ask people whether in the country legally or not. It doesn't matter to us. If you commit a crime, you pay the price. And to us, when you're arrested and brought to the jail, we don't ask you whether you're in the country illegally or not, because we're not agents of ICE. They have a job to do. And the last point I want to make is, if this bill were to pass and the state of California were to dictate to law enforcement that you can't communicate with your federal partner ICE, what happens next year when they decide that we shouldn't cooperate with DEA on drug cases or with the FBI on terrorism cases? Where's this going to stop? We have to be able to communicate and cooperate with our federal partners and to protect the communities that we're sworn to serve. Thank you.
Jim Nielsen, and I speak with some authority as a longtime chairman of the Board of Prison Terms of California too. And we had a wonderful tool to cooperate with law enforcement. If there was an ICE hold, that's a parole violation, and we could hold that individual up to 35 days, awaiting a hearing on the parole violation. That gave law enforcement a chance to intervene. The big disadvantage and the travesty to the people of California of this bill is it takes the cuffs or the potential of cuffs off the criminals, the dangerous criminals, and puts it on law enforcement. These are dangerous. And folks who tout the dreamers, we're not talking about the dreamers. We're talking about the dangerous felons who have already demonstrated many times over their disregard for our public safety, who have disregarded federal immigration law, repeatedly re-entering felons released from California state prisons, deported, come back again and again and again to prey upon us. This bill has a noble intent, but it's got an insidious undercurrent that affects all of California citizens who are potential and will be victims to these individuals. They are dangerous. One of the provisions of this bill, the handcuffs on law enforcement, you cannot consider prior criminality. That is an absolute predictor of future criminality. The access to these databases that are so important to the conduct of law enforcement and their ability to do the job protecting us is going to be taken away. Please understand, this is not about people who come here, albeit illegally, not to be dependent, but to become a part of society, to be contributing in whatever the way. These people that we are protecting here, that this bill protects, are ones who are thoroughly and absolutely dangerous. And the public must know that. They are vulnerable. They have already done their dastardly deeds. And they're happening in California now even almost every week. Just look at your local newspapers. The deported, the deported, the deported. But we cannot take a look at their former history. That's the handcuffs this bill puts on law enforcement. And when you do that, ladies and gentlemen, you put yourselves at risk. The people of California need to stand up and speak for themselves and the safety of their children.
You've heard some powerful testimony from law enforcement. I'd just like to say that SB 54 does not draw a distinction between those who come to our country to improve their station life and those who come to our country to prey on others. By shielding rapists, child molesters who are serving time in our jails, it only guarantees that they're returned to our communities to prey on us again. But more importantly, it forces ICE to go door to door to look for them. And when they knock on your door and that felon's not there, or even if the felon's there, they're not just asking for their papers, they're asking for everybody's papers. So this puts every dreamer at risk in California by forcing ICE to look for felons in your neighborhood. The second thing is there is no state law that will prohibit the federal government from keeping its federal task. You cannot stop ICE from picking people up who are here illegally. So this notion that we can write a law and stop them, that's simply not true. All we've done is reprioritize what they're going after. They want to go after the most hardened criminals first, and we're making it difficult for them to find those criminals by not allowing them access to our jails and prisons. We have over 11,600 serving in our prison system. Now, I've heard time and time again that if you bring up this issue, that you're a racist. Well, let me tell you this. If you deny that people are here illegally committing felonies, and you deny that the fact that we have 11,600 in our prisons right now, then you're a crime denier. And we receive $50.6 million from the federal government to offset the cost of housing those folks. We need to allow ICE access to these prisons and to our local jails so that they can deport the most dangerous of criminals. We're talking about rapists and child molesters, so that they don't return to our community and prey on, by the way, when they come back and prey, they don't say, are you here legally or are you here as an undocumented. They prey on everyone. And so it's really important that we stop this bill, because this foolishness, I mean, I get that we got a lot of press today talking about why this is a bad bill. But because somebody wants to run for higher office, they should not put us all in jeopardy on the safety side. So we're going to open up to questions. Does anybody have a question for us?
So even without this bill, there's potentially federal money in jeopardy in California based on actions taken by cities and counties.
I'm not sure I understand your question. Right now, we don't, maybe the sheriffs can speak to this better, but this takes it a step further. They have access now. When they call and they ask about somebody, they get a response. This bill would prohibit them from receiving a response. And much of the money are grants to the state. So we would no longer be qualified to apply for those grants. So we'd be losing this money because of our actions that we haven't lost in the past. But sheriffs, would you like to respond?
Sure, and I think, if I understand your question.
The question would be, what is your position on potentially losing out, putting this bill aside on federal grant money for counties and cities that already have declared themselves?
Sure. And the jury's still out on what effect that will have on those jurisdictions, the cities and counties. But what you see right now is more, with very few exceptions, these are cities declaring themselves as sanctuary cities. Well, it's easy to stand up and be brave when the risk to you is very little. The cities stand to not lose very much, if anything at all, depending on where they are in the state. It's the counties, specifically the sheriff's department and the jails, that are going to be damaged the most. I can't simply stand up and say we're going to be a sanctuary sheriff's department. I can't speak for the county, because that is completely contrary to my oath to keep 1.5 million people as safe as possible. That's the risk to me. I mean, that is the consequence to me for declaring myself a sanctuary county entity. Those things don't exist with the sanctuary city. So to answer your question, I don't think anyone really knows what the full effect of a city declaring themselves as a sanctuary city. But I can tell you, aside from the money, and although it's important to consider the money, again, I know it should never be a driving factor in these types of legislations. Aside from the money, it will impair our ability to provide public safety in the communities, and that's what we as sheriffs are most concerned with.
We know it's $50.6 million for our prison system this year. It's $117 million statewide. It could be greater, but that's the very minimum that we put at risk by declaring us a sanctuary state. Next question, anyone? This is an easy crowd. I thought for sure you'd have some tough questions. Sure.
Well, I don't think anybody in the state of California honors ICE.
I'm going to have you do it because they're all in the hot box.
I don't think anyone in the state of California, any sheriff, is honoring the 48-hour detainers. When I had 48-hour detainers, when I honored those, the suits occurred, and our attorney believes that it's unconstitutional as well. That's when I invited ICE into my facility to do their job without me having to give them information. I just give them space and access to the database. So I think the 48-hour detainer is, without some type of due process, is probably a dead issue.
So you have to boot ICE out of your building, then, it sounds like.
Well, I might be told to do that. I'm not sure what I'll do at this point.
Under 54, it would require that they couldn't give space, they couldn't give access, they couldn't communicate. So when you look through the paragraph of 54, it's absolutely outrageous, the level of depth that it goes to ensure that there's no communications or cooperations whatsoever. But that doesn't stop ICE from enforcing it. It just forces them to go, instead of going to the epicenter of crime, people serving in our jails and prisons, now they'll be coming door to door to find those folks. And that puts all the dreamers at risk, puts everybody who's hardworking, who wants to do right at risk.
Politically, obviously, Democrats control the state Senate and Assembly, and there's 2 Senate Republicans here. Is the caucus itself united around opposing this, or are there members within the caucus that support the bill?
The Republican or Democrat caucus? Oh, Jim's our caucus chair.
Well, we haven't taken a poll, but I would think that the citizens of all the counties that most Californians represent are sensitive to this issue. Maybe in terms of the Dreamers, in many counties, they are sympathetic to the Dreamers. But they don't know what this is really going to do. When they find out, they're going to be in sympathy with what we're talking about here today. And as far as the Republicans, I believe most of the folks that we represent feel just as strongly as we do about this.
Any additional questions? We're all going to be available if you'd like to come up and talk to us afterwards. We would encourage you to do it. There's a lot more to this issue. When you break it down further, it's pretty outrageous. We do have some little handouts for you. One thing I should tell you is we received a letter this morning from the Orange County Sheriff's Department. They're going to lose $22 million. They rent over 800 beds to ICE, and they're going to have to break that agreement. That $22 million means that officers on the beat, sheriffs on the beat, deputies on the beat may not be there for you because they won't be able to afford them. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
And by the way, you're liberating the cartels in California, folks, giving them new venues for freedom to prey upon us, the cartels.